I don't know if it was fate or my subconscious refusing to ignore the signs any longer, but that Tuesday afternoon was when my life changed forever. It started innocuously enough. I was home alone, nursing the quiet while Jenna, my wife, was supposedly away on another business trip. A decade of marriage had taught me to trust her, or so I thought. But trust, like love, can become a fragile illusion. Our relationship had been a blend of vibrant highs and dull, stagnant lows. Jenna was a marketing executive, her life a whirlwind of meetings, conferences, and deadlines. My career as a freelance writer allowed me to be the supportive partner, anchoring her chaotic existence. But somewhere along the line, our rhythm faltered. She became distant, her laughter less frequent, her touch hesitant. I told myself it was stress, her ambitious spirit stretching thin. What I didn't realize was that it was something far more insidious. That day, I was finishing up a client article when my phone buzzed, a text from Jenna. Meetings running late. Dinner with colleagues tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Her messages had grown colder over time. No emojis, no warmth, just clipped updates that felt more obligatory than heartfelt. I had grown accustomed to her busy life, but this text struck a strange chord. Something inside me stirred, a whisper of doubt I couldn't shake. I walked to the bedroom, her absence palpable. Her closet door was slightly ajar, a rare oversight for her meticulous nature. I reached to close it but paused. There, in the dim light, was an unfamiliar piece of clothing. A man's leather jacket, tucked haphazardly among her dresses. My chest tightened as I realized it wasn't mine. Adrenaline surged through me, my heart pounding louder with each passing second. A sudden noise behind me, a rustling sound, froze me in place. Slowly, I turned toward the bathroom door. It was ajar, a shadow moving within. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sharp but trembling. The bathroom door creaked open, and out stepped a man. Mid-30s, disheveled, shirt untucked, face pale as he registered my presence. I can explain," he stammered, raising his hands as if to placate me. I didn't give him the chance. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "Hello, police? I have an intruder in my house," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. The man pleaded, trying to talk over me, but I ignored him. I wasn't interested in his excuses. My trust had already shattered into pieces, and those shards were now slicing through whatever love I thought still existed in our marriage. As I waited for the authorities to arrive, the man slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "She told me you wouldn't be home," he muttered. His words hung in the air, confirming what I already suspected but didn't want to believe. My wife, the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, had brought her lover into our home. I clenched my fists, determined not to let the rage consume me. This was just the beginning. My world had just been upended, but I wasn't going to let it break me. This was far from over. The minutes before the police arrived stretched endlessly. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the man who had intruded upon my life in more ways than one. He looked small now, shrinking under the weight of what he'd done. Or maybe just the weight of getting caught. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the tense silence. He hesitated, glancing toward the door as if considering an escape. Then, as if resigning himself to the inevitable, he sighed. "My name is Aaron." "Aaron," I repeated, testing the name on my tongue like a bitter pill. "And how long have you been seeing my wife?" His eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. "Look, man, I didn't know things would turn out like this. I thought she was in an unhappy marriage." She said you wouldn't care." My fists tightened at my sides. The audacity of his words threatened to push me over the edge. "She said I wouldn't care?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. Aaron nodded, his face flushed. "She told me you were distant, that you didn't love her the way you used to." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Distant, unloving. Was that how Jenna had framed our life together? As though I had been the one to abandon us? The sound of sirens cut through the heavy tension. I stepped back, putting space between Aaron and myself. "Stay where you are," I said coldly. "You can explain all of this to the cops." When the officers arrived, I gave them a quick rundown of the situation. They led Aaron out of the house in handcuffs, though I knew his charges, trespassing, at the very least, would pale in comparison to the betrayal he represented. As they loaded him into the squad car, one of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to, just to send a message. But another part of me knew this wasn't about him. He wasn't the architect of my misery. Jenna was. No, I said finally. Let him go. The officer raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Aaron threw me one last pitiful look before they drove off. I didn't care. My focus was elsewhere. The house was eerily silent once the commotion ended. I stood in the doorway for what felt like hours, waiting for Jenna to come home. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Would she deny it? Would she beg for forgiveness? Would she walk through the door as though nothing had happened? Finally, around midnight, I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded as I watched her step through the front door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She froze when she saw me standing there, arms crossed, the leather jacket I had found now draped over the back of a chair. "David," she said, her voice laced with surprise. "You're still up?" I didn't respond. I simply stared at her, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Her eyes flicked to the jacket, then back to me. "Whose jacket is that?" I asked, my voice even but loaded with implication. Her face paled. I don't know," she stammered, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. I stepped closer, my gaze never leaving hers. "Don't lie to me, Jenna. Not anymore." She opened her mouth as if to respond but quickly closed it, her eyes darting toward the door. It was then I realized she was looking for an escape, just like Aaron had. "No," I said firmly, blocking her path. "You don't get to run from this." Her shoulders slumped as the facade crumbled. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed bitterly. "It's exactly what I think. I found him, Jenna, in our house, in our bedroom." She flinched as if I had struck her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "Not anymore." "Do you love him?" I demanded. Her lips trembled. I don't know." The words cut deeper than I thought possible. I turned away, unable to look at her. "Then I guess you've got a lot to figure out," I said. "But don't think for a second that I'll let you destroy me while you do." She reached for me, but I stepped back, my resolve hardening. "Don't," I warned. "You've made your choices, Jenna. Now you'll face the consequences." I left her standing there, tears streaming down her face, as I walked upstairs to the guest room. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, I needed to focus on the next steps, and the revenge she so richly deserved. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Aaron's face. His pathetic excuses, his claims about Jenna's unhappiness, replayed like a broken record in my mind. And then there was Jenna, her tearful confession, her inability to answer the simplest question. Did she love him? The silence in the house was deafening. Jenna hadn't followed me to the guest room. I heard her pacing downstairs for a while before the soft creak of the couch confirmed she'd chosen to sleep there. Good. I didn't want to see her face, not until I had a clearer idea of what I wanted to do. Morning came painfully slow. The sun rose, casting light on a day I hadn't prepared for. I decided I needed answers. No more half-truths, no more evasions. Jenna owed me that much. I walked downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were puffy, her hair disheveled. For the first time in years, she looked small, vulnerable. "Talk," I said, leaning against the doorway. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. Her fingers curled around the mug, her knuckles white. "I don't know where to start." "Try the beginning," I said coldly. "When did it start? How long has it been going on?" Her lip quivered as she set the mug down, her hands trembling. "About 6 months," she admitted. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, David. It was just, I don't know, a mistake that got out of hand." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You brought him into our house, Jenna. You risked everything we built. For what? A fling? It wasn't just about him, she snapped, suddenly defensive. It was about me. I felt invisible, like I wasn't enough. Like you didn't care anymore. The words hit me like a slap. You think I didn't care? I shouted. Everything I've done has been for you, for us. I gave you space, supported your career, picked up the slack at home so you could chase your ambitions. And this is how you repay me? She winced, guilt flashing across her face. I know I screwed up. I know that. Okay? But it wasn't just about us. It was about me feeling alive again. Alive. The word stung, a cruel indictment of our life together. And what about me, Jenna? What about my life? My feelings? I don't know what to say, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I shook my head, disgusted. Then don't say anything. Actions speak louder, Jenna, and yours have said enough. I turned to leave, but she reached out, her hand brushing my arm. Please, David, don't walk away. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I stared at her hand, her touch alien now. I don't know if this can be fixed, I said, my voice heavy. But if you're serious, you'll tell me everything. No more lies, Jenna. No more secrets. And if you don't, I'll make sure you regret it. Her face paled at my tone, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Fear, and the faintest glimmer of understanding that she had no control anymore. This was my life now, my terms, and I would uncover every last truth, no matter how much it hurt. Jenna took a shaky breath, her eyes darting to the window as if looking for an escape. I stayed silent, watching her squirm. There was no room for mercy, not after what she had done. 6 months, she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. It started. I don't even know how it started. He was at a conference I went to in New York. We were just talking, nothing serious at first. I didn't even think of him that way. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. But then you did, I said flatly. She flinched but nodded. It was harmless, or so I thought. Just flirting, really. Then he asked me to dinner, just the two of us. I told myself it was innocent, but that's where it all started. My stomach churned. I could picture it clearly, her dressed to the nines, laughing at his jokes, leaning in just a little too close. A part of me wanted to walk out, to stop her story before it poisoned me further, but I needed to know. I needed to hear it all. How did it go from dinner to this? I gestured vaguely toward the house, still tainted by Erin's presence. Her lip trembled. I don't know, she said weakly. One thing led to another. The next conference, we crossed the line. I hated myself afterward. I swore it would never happen again. But it did, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Yes. The admission came out as a sob. I couldn't stop. It was like I was two different people. One who loved you and the life we built, and another who... She trailed off, covering her face with her hands. I didn't feel pity, only anger. Did he love you? I demanded. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. What? It's a simple question. Did Erin love you? She hesitated, biting her lip. He said he did, but I don't think it was real. It was convenient, fun. He made me feel wanted, but I don't think it was love. The irony of her words was almost laughable. So you ruined our marriage for someone who didn't even care about you, I said, my voice dripping with bitterness. It wasn't like that, she protested, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I lost myself somewhere along the way. Don't you dare try to paint yourself as the victim, I snapped. You didn't lose yourself, Jenna. You threw us away. You chose this. You chose him. She dissolved into sobs, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. I'm done listening to excuses, I said coldly. From now on, you'll give me the truth, every ugly, unvarnished detail. If I even think you're lying, you'll wish you had never opened your mouth. Her tears slowed as she nodded, her face pale and resigned. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, a woman trapped in a web of her own making. And I was determined to unravel it, thread by thread, until there was nothing left to hide. Once Jenna finished her shallow confession, I realized words weren't enough. She'd give me only as much truth as she thought I could handle, carefully tailored to paint her in the best possible light. If I wanted the full story, I'd have to find it myself. "Give me your phone," I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "What? Why? You want me to believe you're telling me everything?" I crossed my arms. "Then prove it. Your phone, Jenna. Now." She hesitated, clutching her purse as though it held her lifeline. "David, Don't," I interrupted. "Don't make excuses. You owe me this." Slowly, reluctantly, she slid her phone across the table. I picked it up, my fingers shaking slightly as I unlocked it. Jenna wasn't tech-savvy, and her passcode, our wedding date, was an ironic reminder of how far we'd fallen. The first place I checked was her messages. Aaron's name popped up immediately, and I opened the thread. My stomach churned as I scrolled through their conversations. Dozens of messages filled with pet names, inside jokes, and intimate promises. "I can't wait to see you again," I read aloud, my voice heavy with sarcasm. "Every time I'm with you, I feel alive." I looked up, my eyes burning into hers. "Alive, huh? Guess I was just killing you, wasn't I?" She flinched as though I'd struck her. "David, Save it," I snapped, scrolling further. The texts became explicit, detailing their plans and desires in ways that made my skin crawl. Dates, locations, even excuses she'd used to cover her tracks, all laid out in nauseating clarity. Then I found the pictures. A flood of photos filled the screen. Selfies of them together, some taken in hotels, others in places I couldn't immediately identify. But the most gut-wrenching were the ones taken here, in our home. One photo, in particular, stopped me cold. Aaron sitting on our couch, his arms slung casually around Jenna, a glass of wine in hand. "You brought him here," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "Into our house. Into my life. You let him sit on my couch, drink my wine, like he belonged here." Jenna's face crumpled, her hands pressed against her mouth as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I never meant." "Don't," I barked, slamming the phone down on the table. "Don't say you didn't mean for it to happen. You made it happen, Jenna. You planned it. Every lie, every excuse, every stolen moment. You made those choices." She sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking, but I felt no pity. I was too consumed by the weight of what I'd seen. My mind raced, piecing together a plan. It wasn't enough for Jenna to confess or cry. She needed to face the full scope of what she had done. And Aaron? He wouldn't walk away unscathed either. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about justice, and I'd see it through to the bitter end. I sat in the guest room that night, staring at the ceiling as the weight of everything settled on my chest. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was resolute. Jenna and Aaron had treated me like a fool, exploiting my trust, my love, my home. That betrayal needed to be answered, and not with empty words or broken apologies. It was time to act. My laptop sat open on the desk, the glow of the screen illuminating the darkened room. I hadn't touched it in hours, but the thought of what I needed to do kept pulling me back. Jenna's phone had given me more than enough evidence. Their texts, photos, and plans were all documented. But I needed more. If I was going to see this through, I wanted to dismantle the entire facade they had built. First, I opened a private browser and searched for Aaron. His name and a few details Jenna had carelessly provided led me to his social media profiles. He wasn't as careful as he should have been for someone involved in an affair. Photos of him at work functions, tag posts with friends, and even a few pictures from the same conferences Jenna had attended confirmed what I already knew. But one thing stood out: a photo of Aaron standing with another woman, his arm draped around her shoulders. Curious, I clicked on her profile. Her name was Emma, and judging by the captions on her posts, she was Aaron's wife. I leaned back, my mind racing. He had a family too. Suddenly, this wasn't just about me and Jenna anymore. It was about the lives they had so recklessly endangered. I saved the screenshots, making sure to catalog every piece of evidence carefully. If Emma didn't know about Aaron's affair yet, she deserved to. But first, I needed to confront Jenna again. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and staring blankly out the window. She didn't look up as I walked in. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of her guilt. "Jenna," I said, my voice cold but controlled. "We're not done." She turned to me, her eyes rimmed with red. "David, I held up a hand to silence her. "No excuses. No tears. Just answers. You've lied to me enough." She nodded slowly, her fingers trembling as she set the mug down. "What do you want to know?" I placed my laptop on the table, the photo of Aaron and Emma displayed prominently on the screen. "Who is she?" Jenna's face went pale. That's Aaron's wife." "You knew he was married?" I said flatly, not surprised but still disgusted. "And you still let this happen?" She lowered her gaze. "He told me they weren't happy, that they were practically separated." I laughed bitterly. "Of course he did. That's the oldest lie in the book, Jenna. But let me tell you something. Emma deserves to know the truth, just like I did." Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "David, no. Please don't do that." "Oh, I'm going to," I said firmly. "And you're going to help me. It's time for Aaron to face the consequences, too." The fear in her eyes only steeled my resolve. She might have betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let her, or Aaron, walk away unscathed. This was just the beginning of the justice they both deserved. Jenna sat across from me, frozen in her seat. Her fear was palpable, her wide eyes darting between the screen and me as though she were trapped in a nightmare. In some ways, she was. But this nightmare was one she created, and I had no intention of letting her wake up from it just yet. "You're serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Dead serious," I replied, my tone devoid of sympathy. "Emma deserves to know what her husband has been up to. You've been lying to me for months, Jenna. I won't let you hide the truth from her too." She opened her mouth to argue, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, she nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping further. "What do you want me to do?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You're going to tell her everything," I said. "Every detail, every lie, every betrayal. And you're going to do it today." Jenna's face crumpled. "David, I don't—" "Stop," I interrupted sharply. "You don't get to argue. You don't get to stall. You've already made your choices, Jenna. Now you'll deal with the fallout." She hesitated for a long moment before nodding again. "Okay," she murmured, barely audible. I opened Aaron's social media page and found Emma's contact information, an email address and a phone number listed under her business profile. "Perfect. We'll start with an email," I said, turning the laptop toward Jenna. "Write it. Now." Her hands trembled as she reached for the keyboard, her fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys. "What do I say?" "The truth," I said coldly. "And don't leave anything out." She typed slowly, her breathing uneven as she tried to put her betrayal into words. I leaned over her shoulder, reading every line as it appeared on the screen. "Dear Emma, I'm writing this because you deserve to know the truth about your husband, Aaron. He and I have been involved in an affair for the past 6 months, and I deeply regret the pain this will cause you. It started during a work conference, and I take full responsibility for my actions. I know this may come as a shock, but you have every right to know what has been happening behind your back." She paused, her fingers trembling. "Keep going," I said. "I don't know what else to say," she whispered. "Then I'll help you," I snapped. "Tell her how often you met him, where, how you lied to me and to her. Spell it out, Jenna. She deserves the details." Jenna flinched but resumed typing, each word a dagger to the carefully constructed life she and Aaron had tried to maintain. By the time she was finished, the email was a confessional, a raw, unfiltered admission of guilt. When she stopped, I read through it again, ensuring there were no convenient omissions. Satisfied, I nodded. "Send it." Her breath hitched, but she pressed the button. The email was gone, flying into the ether to deliver the truth to Emma's inbox. "Now the phone," I said, handing her mine. Jenna looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "David, please. An email is enough." "Call her," I growled. "Or I will." With shaking hands, Jenna dialed the number. As the phone rang, I watched her crumble further, the weight of her actions finally pressing down on her. When Emma answered, her voice cautious, Jenna began to speak. "Hi, is this Emma?" Jenna's voice cracked. The moment Emma confirmed her identity, Jenna began to confess, her voice halting and tearful. I listened to every word, my resolve hardening with each painful syllable. This was the beginning of justice, not just for me but for Emma, too. The web of lies was unraveling, and I was determined to see it all destroyed. As Jenna stammered through her confession, I could hear Emma's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the call. At first, she was silent, perhaps processing the weight of what she had just been told. Then her voice cut through the line, steady but brimming with anger. "Are you serious right now?" Emma hissed. "You're telling me that my husband, the father of my children, has been sneaking around with you for months?" Jenna winced, unable to meet my gaze. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. Emma didn't hold back. "You're disgusting. Both of you. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To my family? How could you do this?" Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't intervene. This wasn't my moment to soothe or console. It was Emma's moment to unleash the fury she had every right to feel. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Jenna offered weakly. Emma's laugh was cold and bitter. "Didn't mean for it to happen? You're telling me you tripped and fell into an affair? Don't give me that garbage. You chose this. Every lie you told, every secret meeting, every time you smiled at me like nothing was wrong. You chose all of it." The venom in Emma's voice made even Jenna shrink further into herself. For the first time, I saw my wife through someone else's eyes, not as a victim or a woman who made a mistake, but as a selfish, calculating person who had hurt others without a second thought. Emma's tirade lasted for several more minutes, and Jenna absorbed every word, her silence speaking louder than any apology she could muster. When Emma finally hung up, I let the silence stretch between us. "She knows now," I said coldly. "That's one step. But this isn't over." The next task on my mental list was informing those closest to us. I wouldn't let Jenna control the narrative or spin the story to her benefit. If anyone was going to tell the truth, it would be me. "Who else knows about Aaron?" I asked. Jenna hesitated, her face pale. "No one. I swear." I wasn't sure I believed her, but it didn't matter. I'd reach out to everyone who needed to know anyway. Our families, our friends, even her colleagues if necessary. Her affair would be laid bare. I started with her parents. They deserved to hear this from me, not through the grapevine. I dialed her mother, who picked up on the second ring. "David, what a surprise," she said cheerfully. "I wish it was a good one," I replied, my tone serious. Over the next 15 minutes, I laid everything out. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. Her mother was stunned into silence, her disbelief palpable. "Jenna," she finally said, her voice breaking, "is this true?" Jenna nodded miserably, her face streaked with tears. Her mother's voice hardened. "How could you do this, Jenna? To David? To us?" With Emma in the loop, I knew it was time to confront Aaron. He'd slithered out of my house once, but there wouldn't be a second escape. I reached out to Emma, who agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, she was already there, her expression grim. "He's on his way," she said. Aaron arrived 10 minutes later, his face shifting from smug confidence to apprehension the moment he saw me. "You two have a lot to answer for," Emma said icily, gesturing for him to sit. I didn't let him speak. "You came into my home, Aaron. You destroyed my marriage, disrespected my family, and treated me like a fool. Now you're going to face the consequences." With the evidence I'd gathered, I met with a lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. Emma, too, sought legal advice. Together, we vowed to strip Jenna and Aaron of every ounce of power they thought they had. The lawyer was optimistic. "You have more than enough evidence to build a strong case. Adultery is hard to dispute when you have this much proof." I left his office with a renewed sense of purpose. This wouldn't just be a divorce. It would be the end of Jenna's manipulation and the start of my freedom. Aaron and Jenna's affair didn't stay private for long. Between Emma's fury and my decision to share the truth with key people, word spread quickly. Colleagues whispered in hallways, Friends stopped answering Jenna's calls, and even her parents distanced themselves. At work, Aaron faced scrutiny, his reputation tarnished. His career, which he had likely prioritized over his marriage, began to crumble. Jenna, too, became a pariah in our social circles. As the dust settled, I began to rebuild. The divorce was messy but worth it. I moved into a new home, smaller but peaceful, and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The last piece of my plan was a letter. I wrote it to both Jenna and Aaron, detailing exactly how their choices had destroyed their lives and mine. I left nothing unsaid. I mailed it anonymously, ensuring it would reach them. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about closure. When I walked away from the mailbox, I felt lighter. The revenge was complete, and so was my journey. Jenna and Aaron were ghosts of a past I had finally left behind.